Hi guys, so we're going to look at roots of a quadratic equation. Suppose you have a quadratic equation of this form, which is x squared plus 5x plus 6 is equal to 0. How can we find the values of x? So we can find the values of x by factorizing or using any of the methods. So if we factorize, we'll have to find the value of a is a coefficient of x squared, which is 1. B is a coefficient of x, which is 5. C is a constant, which is 6. Then we get the product. The product is found by saying a by c, where a is 1, c is 6. Then the sum is the value of b, which is equal to 5. Then the factors are found by getting two numbers that would multiply to give us 6 and add to give us 5. So those numbers are 2 and 3. Then from there, our equation will be x plus 2. Then we also have x plus 3 is equal to 0. Therefore, here we say x plus 2 is equal to 0 or x plus 3 is equal to 0. So now, here we can subtract 2 here, we also subtract 2 there. Here we subtract 3 here, we also subtract 3 there. Then x is equal to, this will cancel, x is equal to negative 2, or x is equal to, this will equally cancel, x is equal to negative 3. So we have found two values for x. So these values we have found, they are called the roots of the equation. So these are called the roots. So we can name the first one, we can name it alpha. The second one, we can give it beta. So in this video, we're going to look at alpha and beta as roots of a quadratic equation. Now, the first thing we're going to consider is a situation where they give you roots of a quadratic equation, then they ask you to find the quadratic equation. What do I mean? So this is what we're going to do. Now, suppose we don't know our quadratic equation. So we have found they have given us alpha to be equal to negative 2, and they have given us beta to be equal to negative 3. So these are the roots that we have been given. Then the question is asking us to find the quadratic equation. How do we find the quadratic equation if we've only been given roots? So this is what we do. So basically, we can find the root, we can find a quadratic equation given roots by using this formula. So we say x minus alpha multiplied by x minus beta, this should be equal to 0. So we can use this equation to find a quadratic equation given the values of alpha and beta. So from there now, what do we do? So we're going to say x minus, on alpha we have negative 2. So we're going to open brackets and put negative 2 like that. Then open brackets again, x minus, the value of beta is negative 3. So we open brackets and we close like that. Like this, we're going to say what is negative times negative? That one is positive. Then what is here again, negative times negative, we get positive like that. Then from there, what do? We multiply. This x is going to multiply that x, then we're going to get x squared. The same x is going to multiply 3, then we get 3x. Then 2 is going to multiply x, so that we get 2x. Then the same 2 will multiply 3, so that we get 6. So how does that simplify? So that one is going to simplify now. Therefore, we're going to get x squared. Then we'll group the like terms, 3x plus 2x, we get 5x. So write our 5x there. then we say plus 6, this should equal to 0. So now what we have found here is a quadratic equation where we only had the values of alpha and beta. We have done the opposite. Now let's compare what we found with what we had. So this is x squared plus 5x plus 6. So if we go back to the quadratic equation that we started with, we are going to discover that it is one and the same. Can you compare this one here with the one that we have just found? So we have x squared plus 5x plus 6. Same here, we have x squared plus 5x plus 6. So that is how you can find a quadratic equation when you've been given the roots. We are going to proceed now. In proceeding, we are going to look at how we can answer certain questions involving alpha and beta. So what are we going to do? I'm going to write a question here that we are going to follow. That will be a guide. Now, suppose alpha and beta are roots of a quadratic equation. So suppose alpha and beta are roots of the quadratic equation, which is 2x squared then minus 6x plus 1 is equal to 0. So suppose alpha and beta are roots of that, then we've been asked to find the following. So we find first one, we find alpha plus beta. Then the second one, we find alpha multiplied by beta. Then the third one, we find 1 over alpha plus 1 over beta. Then we put a last one here, we find alpha squared plus beta squared. Now how can we find these? Now to find answers to these, it is just straightforward. So this is what we're going to do. So on our solutions, in order for us to find alpha, plus beta, there is a formula that we are going to use. So there is a formula that we're going to use that is going to help us. Alright, so let's do that. So the first one is asking us to find alpha plus beta. So how do you find alpha plus beta? So in order for us to find alpha plus beta, we use this formula that is negative b over a. So where we know to say the coefficient of x squared represents a, the coefficient of x represents b, then the constant term represents c. So our b is negative 6, so this is going to be negative, then open brackets, another negative, then 6, close brackets. Then over the value of a is 2. Then negative times negative is positive 6 over 2, and positive 6 over 2 we get a 3. So the value of alpha multiplied by beta, we get what? We get that one. Then how do we find alpha multiplied by beta? So that one has been dealt with. So to get alpha multiplied by beta, we use this formula, which is c over a, where our c, we know that it is 1, then our a, it is 2. So alpha over beta is just 1 over 2, or you can leave it as 0.5, but I would prefer leaving it as a fraction. So we get 1 over 2 as our answer there. So those are formulas we can use to find that. Okay, so we now proceed. How do we find 1 over alpha plus 1 over beta? First thing, we find the common denominator here. So the common denominator is alpha beta. Then when we say alpha into alpha, we remain with beta. Beta times 1, that's beta, plus beta into beta, we remain with alpha. Alpha times 1, that's alpha. Then we know that beta plus alpha is the same as alpha plus beta. So what is alpha plus beta? So alpha plus beta is 3. So where there is alpha plus beta, we found 3. Then alpha beta, we found 1 over 2. So 1 over 2. So this can be written as, so I'm going to say this is equal to 3 divided by 1 over 2. So this can also be written as 3 over 1 multiplied by, then this becomes 2 over 1. Then 3 by 2 is 6. 6 divided by 1, that is just 6. So 6 is the final answer that we get for that one. Alright, then how do we find this one here? So alpha squared plus beta squared. Now suppose we have alpha plus beta, then we square them. So if you square alpha plus beta, you are going to get alpha squared plus 2 alpha beta plus beta squared. Then from there, now what are we going to do? We are going to say if we interchange this is going to be alpha squared plus 2 alpha beta plus beta squared is equal to alpha plus beta squared. Then this is equal to alpha squared plus beta squared is equal to, now the 2 alpha beta is crossing the equal sign, and since it is positive, when it crosses the equal sign, it will be negative 2 alpha beta. Alright, from there now we say alpha squared plus beta squared is equal to, so what is the value of alpha plus beta? We found alpha plus beta there to be 3. Then it is saying squared minus 2. What is the value of alpha beta? Alpha beta is half. Then this becomes 3 squared is 9 minus 2 multiplied by half is 1. Then 9 minus 1 we get 8. So the value of alpha squared plus beta squared is equal to 8. So basically, that is how you can answer such questions that involves alpha and beta.